All right, we do have enough for a quorum. So Leanne, whenever you're ready, you can start the meeting.
Okay, so we can call the meeting to order. Do we have any hearing of the public?
I would like to speak.
Okay, Freda?
Yes. This is Freda Tepper. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, because last time we had a problem. Just a second, I have to get into my document. So I will preface my comments by telling you that yesterday or Monday, I participated in a meeting of the Pedestrian Research Committee of the Transportation Research Board. And we discussed a couple of the items that I'm concerned about and the need to do research in those areas in order to affect some change in the MUTCD, etc. So the first comment is just housekeeping. The font is it's very hard to read. Some of us, anyway, just please try to change that. So I have provided, hopefully you've all got my handout, but I provided a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 MMPS numbers. And for these projects below and all future projects involving traffic signals and closures of sidewalks during construction, ensure that proper management and detectable notification and appropriate detours at signalized crossings, not mid-block, are provided whenever sidewalks are closed. Flagging and barriers with no lower bars or groups of cones does not qualify as detectable warning. Sidewalks should only be closed when absolutely necessary and for the shortest amount of time. Ensure that all signalized crossings have APS, which is accessible pedestrian signals. So I've given you that list, and I would apply that same request to all additional projects. In addition to these two projects, MMPS 110, 377, and 379, which are the bike paths on Green Garden and French, please ensure that community involvement is involved in the design of these bikeways. I repeatedly ask for such involvement. Where there are separated protected bike lanes, utilize the most current best management and pedestrian safety accessible research and practices to ensure the project does not impair the ability of pedestrians who are blind and visually impaired to safely cross streets where there are shared or protected bike lanes. And this is one of the things we discussed yesterday at the Pedestrian Research Committee. For MMPS 89218, Project Adler moved up because of Infrastructure and Jobs Act bill on Pittsburgh. It's extremely desirable to fund construction of sidewalks on Pittsburgh, especially between 26 and West 8th, where there are pedestrians, buses, and bus stops and little or no sidewalk. APS signals needed here as well. With the removal of the 30 bus going to West Erie Plaza, more pedestrians are forced to walk in the street. The public transportation program. Where is the rider involvement occurring in this process? Where is funding given the infrastructure plan for increased service frequency and density and a return to Sunday service? We don't want to see this money only going to capital improvements and more equipment. Winter pedestrian safety. We're a part of the country that frequently experiences heavy and repeated snow. Erie County and the Erie Metropolitan area is sorely lacking a method for dealing with snow removal in order to ensure safe pedestrian travel. Commercial, educational, publicly owned, church-owned properties often leave extensive stretches of sidewalk in an uncleared condition after snow. In addition to that, these commercial properties, etc., often leave extremely large snow berms blocking the sidewalk, with now accumulated from clearing their driveways and parking lots. City and other plow operations leave massive piles of snow that block intersections. I can show you some really horrendous examples of what the city plows have done on Brown Street. They leave piles totally beyond the capacity of residential property owners to clear. Excuse me, Our localities need to follow the lead of places like Anchorage, Alaska, that have dump trucks accompany plows and move excessive snow accumulation to designated locations. Property under the management of the Erie Redevelopment Authority, Erie Land Bank, etc. are ideal places to pile the snow rather than blocking access to crosswalks. For the public involvement process, it is important to have a process that is truly welcoming and helps people engage in the process. I recommend the MPO have a public study session with the Erie City Council during or preceding the 30-day public comment period. Help people understand the planning process and how to read and comment on the plan. Make documents available at the library as well as on the MPO website. Help people understand the MMPS system and how to look at projects on the PennDOT maps. Warrant for traffic signal where there is considerable latent demand, like Cranberry and Bayfront Connector, is an example of a location where there are significant safety concerns causing people to avoid utilizing the pedestrian crossing and for vehicles to even want to turn there. PennDOT and Erie indicated they have to do a traffic count study to determine if the intersection meets the numerical threshold to be able to install a traffic signal. Due to a latent demand for crossing by vehicles and pedestrians because of risk of accident or harm, Erie, PennDOT, and MPO should endeavor to receive a waiver in order to be able to install a traffic signal at this location. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Freda. We appreciate your comments. Is there any other hearing of the public? Okay, we can move on to the election of the chair and vice chair. Are there any, we taking nominations for the chair position?
Yes, would anyone like to make a motion to nominate someone for the chair of the Technical Advisory Committee? As I'm sure you all know, Dave Mitchell, our previous chair, did not get reelected in Quarry, so he is no longer a voting member of the MPO. So would someone like to recommend one of our new voting members to be the chairman?
I would like to make a motion to nominate Matt Waldinger, Mill Creek Township, for chair.
I'll second that motion.
All right, any other nominations? All right, nominations for chairman are closed. Let's move on to nominations for vice chair. Would anyone like to nominate a person for vice chairman of the Technical Advisory Committee?
Emily, this is Matt Waldinger. I'd like to nominate Leanne Parmenter as vice chair.
I'll second that motion.
All right, any other nominations? Hearing none, we have two nominations on the floor for Matt Waldinger to be chair and vice chair Leanne Parmenter. Would anyone like to make a motion to accept this docket of chair people for 2022?
I'll make a motion to accept the docket.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Brian McNulty.
Thank you, Brian. Any opposed? All right, so Matt, welcome to the chairmanship, and you can take over the meeting.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you having your faith in me. I'm honored to be chair of the advisory committee, and I hope that you'll bear with me here for my first meeting while I kind of get my legs under me and stumble through. First of all, I think I'd like to recognize that we do have a lot of new members on the committee now. Welcome to everyone that's new. Obviously, we we'll miss some of the previous members. And I think that brings us on to the next item under number 3, discussion of Chair Emeritus for the Technical Advisory Committee. A few years back, the Coordinating Committee amended the bylaws in order to elect a Chair Emeritus for the Coordinating Committee. And that would be a person that was a previous member of the committee who no longer qualifies to be a voting member, but has a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. That person would be a non-voting member, although they would be able to participate in discussions, give their advice. I do think that this would be a great role for Dave Mitchell. He has a lot of experience, with the committee and government in general. But in order to have a Chair Emeritus for the Technical Advisory Committee, the bylaws would have to be amended in order to do that. And according to Article 9, Section 9 of the bylaws, the Coordinating Committee is the sole body that can make amendments to the bylaws. So I would like to make a motion right now that the Technical Advisory Committee recommend that the Coordinating Committee adopt an amendment to the bylaws. You see them there on your screen. It would allow the Technical Advisory Committee to also elect a Chair Emeritus in the future. So I'll put that out as a motion.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries to recommend to the coordinating committee to amend the bylaws. Next, we'll move on to number 4 on the agenda, the TIP, Transportation Improvement Program. First up are TIP modifications to the FCCs, and that would be Brandon Leach. Brandon, are you here?
Oh, yes, I am, Matt. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to go over the TIP modifications and informational item we had since the December 9th, I believe it was, the coordinating committee meeting. We had actually a total of 10 administrative modifications to the regional TIP, and then 1 informational item that was a change to the interstate TIP. Just to go through them, the first administrative modification was an increase to the Union City Signals project. This was a $70,000 increase in federal STP funds to federal fiscal year 2022. And this was to increase for ADA ramp design and concrete and pedestrian poles. The next one down, modification number 2 was basically using deobligated funds from two projects, as well as the Erie Highway Bridge line item, to add $68,791 to the US 6N to PA 99 intersection improvements. And this was to cover increase in right-of-way expenses. And that, I'm sorry, that was in federal fiscal year 2022 as well. Next item down, number 3, was an increase to the Peach Street Safety and Mobility Improvement Project in federal fiscal year 2022 using $4,200 in federal STP funds. And the Bayfront Parkway Microsurface Project was actually a deobligation, I'm sorry, was written out that was used as the funding source for that. Modification number 4, this was to move funds on the TIP. We're basically we were aligning cash flow for the US 20 Chestnut Street to Imperial Parkway project and adjusting the project letting for the US 6 underpass in Springfield Township project. And it's going to say there were basically, it was taking $1,486,247 from the US 6N underpass project in fiscal year 2024 and moving it to the US 20 Chestnut to Imperial Parkway. Modification number 5 is basically, let's see here. This was taking the US 20 Chestnut Street to Imperial Parkway, taking funds from there in federal fiscal year 2022 and adding it to the US 20 Zook to Chestnut Street project, and also taking money from the Erie Highway Bridge line item, the state 581 funds, and putting it onto the US 20 Zook to Chestnut, as well as the, I'm sorry, I was missing, there was also a Erie Guide Rail upgrade funding source that was putting that money towards the Zook to Chestnut project in federal fiscal year 2022. Actions 6 and 7. This was actually moving funds between years and taking $500,000 in state 185, I'm sorry, funds in 2022 from the Erie County Bridge Repair Contract Project, and $250,000 in state 185 funds from the Erie 2022 Bridge Short Creek Group Project, and $200,000 in state 185 funds from the SR 3006 Bridge over Conneaut Creek project, and returning all that to the Erie County Highway Bridge line item in 2022. And this was because we were moving the let dates out to further years on the tip. Okay. Administrative modification number 8. That involved taking $213,753 in federal STP funds from federal fiscal year 2024 on the Erie Loop Bikeway Green Garden Boulevard project, and $200,000 in federal STP funds. I'm sorry, I got a little tied up there. I think my notes weren't lining up with the chart. So basically, it was taking $413,753 in funds from federal fiscal year 2024 from the US 6N underpass project and putting it on the Erie Loop Bikeway Green Garden Boulevard and the Erie Loop Bikeway French Street projects out in 2024. And this is federal SDP funds. And the last administrative modifications we have involve, this is actually modifications 9 and 10, involve taking monies from 3 projects in federal fiscal year 2022, the Erie Loop Bikeway Green Garden Boulevard, the Erie Loop Bikeway French Street, and the US 20 Chestnut to Imperial Parkway, taking those STP funds from fiscal year 2022 and adding it to the Erie Highway Bridge line item. And then, just looking here, and that's all that move was. So it was basically just an exercise of cash flowing those funds out of 2022 and putting them out to later years. And then the loan informational item was just adding $200,000 in state 185 funds for federal fiscal year 2022 on the interstate tip project, Interstate 79 Conrail Bridges. And that was from the state bridge reserve line item from central office. So having covered those, are there any questions about the modifications on the charts we just covered?
Brandon, I don't have a question. I just wanted to to clarify that these were all administrative actions that were done by PennDOT because they didn't meet the threshold of requiring a vote from the MPO. Emily, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that threshold is $2 million. If the amount's under 2 million, then PennDOT can shift these funds within projects by using administrative actions.
Yes, yes. There are a few other stipulations, like creating a new project with federal funds or something that requires air quality conformity analysis, but all of these meet those thresholds, so they can be moved without an MPO vote.
Okay, just wanted to clarify for the benefit of our new members.
Oh, that was a good point. Yep, sorry about that, but
No, that's fine.
But
Does
yeah,
anybody have any questions for Brandon?
Well, I would just like to say thank you, Brandon and Courtney and everyone from PennDOT for doing that rigmarole for the two bikeways to allow them to have more time before going into construction so that public engagement can be had. I know that was programmed, those two bike lanes were programmed with a very tight time frame. So being able to move them a little later gives more of a cushion for public engagement. So thank you for that.
you're welcome. Yeah, hearing nothing else, I'll pass it on to the next item.
Great. Thank you very much, Brandon.
Thank you.
Next up is the 2023 TIP and TYP update relative to the infrastructure bill funding. So that's Courtney Lyle from PennDOT.
Yes, good morning, everybody. In the packet that Emily sent out is the latest version of our 2023 TYP and any of the projects that we are looking at adding to them. I'm not going to go back through because we do not have a lot of new things from the last time we discussed it. What I really wanted to do was highlight what we did with the IIJA money and then answer any questions that anyone might have. So the IIJA money, for those of you that may not be familiar, is the Infrastructure Improvement and Jobs Act that just was passed, and it includes the increase in funding that we are going to be getting across the nation from that particular bill. And in Erie, we are going to be seeing a substantial increase in bridge funding and some increase in safety funding and NHPP federal roadway funding. So what we are looking at doing when you look at this is any project that is highlighted now in that peach pink color, those are projects that we have been able to advance with this increase in funding at least one construction season. So some of them may be advanced more than one, but what I did was I highlighted any that we advanced at least one calendar year for letting that project. So we have 42 projects in the Erie MPO over the next 12 years that we are looking at advancing at a minimum of 1 year. 17 of them are roadway projects, 25 of them are bridge projects. We also have 14 new projects currently that we have added. Those are the ones that are in purple. We have 6 roadway and 8 bridge projects. We are still evaluating the data to add additional projects onto the TYP specifically for bridge funding. We have about $17 million in the last 8 years of the TIP that we are looking at adding additional structures based on inspection and asset management data that we have. So right now, Bridge is working on that. We are also proposing, as a part of the increase in bridge funding, an increase in the local bridge funding that the municipalities could apply for funding within the MPO. We are looking at taking that from a $950,000 a year to $1.2 million yearly, as well as evaluating, since we do have an increase in funding for any structure that is on the is a federal rated structure. We are looking at whether or not we can add any structures on top of that $1.2 million if there is a need and we have the capacity. So we are proposing 1.2 though yearly for the all 12 years for bridges. And for you guys, because you're definitely going to probably be interested in this, we are maintaining the $500,000 a year for the local federal aid route line item, as well as now adding the $250,000 safety line item that we had discussed that would allow us to use funding that is not safety funding on potential safety issues that are brought forth from citizens, municipalities, any of the planning partners, or something that might be found from, say, county maintenance, from PennDOT's perspective, that may not qualify for HSIP or safety funding, but is a perceived or a simple sort of fix that we can put non-safety money towards. So those are the big things for the 2023 TYP. Any questions? Okay.
I know I'm not a member, but this is Freda Tepper. Why are there no pedestrian projects being included with the additional infrastructure funds?
We do have pedestrian improvements a lot in our bridge and highway projects. So while we classify them as bridge or highway, we are in every one of our projects considering bicyclists and pedestrians.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are future TAP, I don't know if that's still what it's called, Courtney. Is that an old acronym?
Yes, it's
But
TASA
don't we have
now.
more information? Okay.
Yes.
More info
Yep.
to come on that, I think, soon.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep.
Hey, I'd like to add a few comments just to Courtney's information that she provided. And first of all, I don't know as far as the new members that Emily mentioned earlier and Matt mentioned, you know, if any of them are on this call, but we would be happy to provide kind of a planning and programming or a federal and state transportation funding 101 kind of refresher discussion. We could do that at a future TAC meeting. We could do it as a separate meeting only for anyone who would be interested, but we're happy to do that, to explain some of the acronyms and the processes and things like that. And the other thing I really wanted to mention is, I think this is, like we always say, this is a great tip, this 12-year plan, in particular, the 4 years that we kind of focus on in the 2023 draft tip. I see a lot of great projects there. I see assets being maintained, and I see some great improvements like the Bayfront project as an example. One thing that we have talked about that's important to the district, of course, and I think the FHWA is our performance measures, our asset management, and the way we've phrased that in the recent past is our betterment investments. So with this tip in the past, we've shown how much we think we need to invest in betterments, which are really just our main paving projects, our pavements in Erie County, making sure that we're keeping those repaved on cycle for state routes. We're really not anywhere near meeting the level of investment that we think we need still in this draft tip. And again, there's good reasons for that. The Bayfront Parkway project is a big project with huge opportunity and other federal funds like the build grant and things, an opportunity that we don't want to pass up. But just in the future, and as we look forward, before we know it, we'll be talking about the 2025 tip update, and that again will be a priority to us to make sure we're investing as close to the right amount in our pavements as we can possibly afford to. So just wanted to let everybody know that we're, although we've made strides, we've increased those investments in pavements. We're still just a little over half of where we think we need to be, kind of on an annual, looking at this on an annual basis. So those will be conversations that'll be continuing. Thanks.
Hi, this
Great.
is Lindsay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we have you, Lindsay.
Okay, Lindsay DeVito from PennDOT, District 1. I'm the district planner. I just wanted to follow up on the TASA awards for this next round. I spoke with central office yesterday, and they're hoping to announce this spring. So just the heads up with that. They are finishing their reviews and recommendations as we speak.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the update.
Sure.
Courtney, did you have anything more to add?
Yes. The other item is that we are on top of the projects that we are proposing here. We do also still have our safety funding out there, our HSIP, Highway Safety Improvement Program. We are going to be reviewing the long-range transportation plan projects that are on there that qualify for HSIP. We will be looking at advancing them as quickly as possible using some of those funds. So we will be looking at doing that as we move forward as well. And then lastly, while we do not need a vote this particular meeting, the next meeting we probably are going to be asking for one, if not before, via e-ballot, but we are getting IIJA funds in 2022 on the current tip for projects. Right now, we are just starting to be given direction on what we are going to be doing with those funds. We are proposing for the Erie planning region to put them on a specific line item that would be different than the one that we normally use. So that way then we can track where those funds are going and what projects. We are going to be in discussion with the MPO on projects that we would like to advance or that they would like to possibly put up to be funded with that money, but be looking for future conversations about that for this coming year.
Okay.
And
Well,
that's
great.
all I have, unless anyone has any questions.
Any questions on the tip or the TYP? Well, I just want to say thank you to Courtney and Lindsay and Brian for all the hard work that District 1 has done. I think we're all very thankful for the money that came through the infrastructure bill, and we appreciate you putting it to work. And we look forward for what projects have been advanced and what we can do in 22. Also, Brian, I'd like to thank you for your offer of doing sort of a 101 on highway funding for new members, and I think that's something that might be very useful. And I'll talk to Emily and maybe we can set something up, because I do think that's something that even for existing members, a refresher might be useful. So thanks for that.
As I
Sounds
mentioned,
good.
that would be a good topic for a study session that the public is allowed to attend with the city.
Thank you, Freda. We'll take that under consideration. Next up is the 2023 TIP project selection and timeline. That's Emily from Erie County. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Matt. So to follow up on what PennDOT has been saying, that the 4 yellow years here comprise the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, that the MPO is in charge of producing and documenting. So one of the documents that we produce for those 4 years is the project selection process. And since things were so squished with the IIJA fund, I wanted to share this out with everyone to understand the thinking and rationale for moving projects forward with the IIJA funds. So specifically, there are new projects on our 4-year TIP. So Courtney mentioned the 12-year TIP New Year projects. There's lots of new projects for 12 years or more out, but specifically for the 4-year TIP, everything that has an asterisk next to it is a new project that was advanced to the TIP with IIJA funds. So we have our new bridge projects as well as our new pavement projects. So these will be going through lots of other documentation. We do the environmental justice analysis of these projects. We do the performance measure evaluations of these projects, and you will be seeing this coming up in the next few months. So the timeline for the tip will be to adopt the tip in, where did I put that? On June 22nd. So we as an MPO need to adopt that plan on June 22nd. So there will be lots of wheels turning until then, but I wanted to lay that out now. If anyone has any questions about the timeline or the project selection criteria, I can answer them, or PennDOT can answer them now.
Where are the project selection criteria available to look at?
So this document is online with the MPO meeting materials. So all of these meeting materials are posted online for this meeting. So at the moment, this is in that packet. It will be also available during the official public comment period, which will begin, let's see, May 12th. So it will also be posted May 12th, but it is on our website right now.
Right, but the selection criteria is a very specific kind of piece of information. I did not see that in that document.
Well, all of this document is talking through the different selection criteria. So is there a specific project that
usually selection criteria is what you use to see how any individual project meets project objectives so that you can choose the appropriate alternative.
So with this document, well, for example, I'll take one of the bridges. So there's a bridge on East 12th Street over the CSX Railroad in the city of Erie. So this was documented as a project in our 2017 Long-Range Transportation Plan on the TYP, the 12-year document. It was in the Decade of Investment document, and it also came through our Performance Asset Management System called BAMS, which is Bridge Asset Management System. So that is the origin of this project. That's why it was advanced onto the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. So we're meeting our performance measures, which is a federally mandated target that we have to have for deck area in good condition, as well as moving up the projects that were on the LRTP and TYP and meet those objectives in that document. So it's a lot of different factors that go into every single project, if that helps.
Well, hopefully the selection criteria for each project will be discernible so that the public can determine that when they're making comment to the plan.
Well, thank you, Freda. Thank you for that feedback.
Does anybody have any further questions for Emily? Okay, thank you, Emily. Moving on, we'll go now to the $5 local use fee committee, and I'll turn it over to John Tushak.
Emily, I don't have all those notes in front of me. Would you mind giving the summary from our last meeting?
Sure. I pulled it up. Hopefully everyone can see the document on the screen. So the local use fee committee met 2 weeks ago to discuss the most recent allocation of the $5 local use fee. Bridges were selected to keep receiving funding. There was also discussion of moving from specifically poor or structurally deficient bridges into bridge preservation activities in the future to stop bridges from becoming poor and think more about maintenance and the lowest life cycle cost of bridges. So specifically, we talked about there were BOF funds and BRIT funds as well. So those are the TIP funds that Courtney was talking about. So integrating those funds into the projects that the local use fee is assigning funds to. So we have the local use fee funds as well as these BOF funds and BRIT funds, which are federal funds on the tip, but they're all going towards local bridges. So given that, we discussed what communities should get the funds next using our existing prioritization, which is ADT, detour length, and condition. So the next bridges in line, the first was actually Green. Green Township has Donation Road Bridge, but they declined the funds because they did not budget for them this year. This is a reimbursement program, so the municipality has to pay first and the county reimburses. So they would like to do it next year, which is fine. So we moved on to Conneaut Township and Washington Township for Ordox Road Bridge and Beeson Road Bridge. They're both in poor condition, likely will need replacements. So we will need a motion to recommend to the coordinating committee to assign preliminary engineering and final design funding for those two bridges.
Do we have a motion to forward these two projects on to preliminary engineering and final design?
I'll make a motion to forward it to the coordinating committee.
Thank you, John. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Leanne.
Thank you. Thank you, Leanne. Okay, motion on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We will forward this on then to the coordinating committee. Guess moving on, we'll move on to the LRTP draft. Emily, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know you have done a lot of hard work on the LRTP along with WRA. So I'll let you kick it off and then can bring in Scott.
Oh, thanks, Matt. Yes, we do have Scott Thompson Graves of WRA with us, who him and his team have been working very hard to get the LRTP ready in draft form. Hopefully everyone was able to look over the rough draft that we sent out last week. And I believe Scott has a presentation that he can share with us. Scott, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I can walk you guys through a presentation. It says I can't share my screen because somebody else is sharing theirs. All right.
All right, now you should be able to share, Scott.
All right. So are you guys able to see that now?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for the time to meet today, and hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to look through the long-range transportation plan, the draft that had been sent out.
Mm-hmm.
And can you guys still see it if I make it a little bigger? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We are seeing your notes as well,
notes.
Scott.
Oh, do you? Really? All right. Is that better?
Yeah, it's the main PowerPoint screen, but that works.
Okay. So, I mean, essentially, I wanted to provide an update. I know we had some new members that were going to be joining the meeting today. So I just wanted to provide a brief update of, information that we've already presented in the past, but for them, it might be new. Mm-hmm. So the plan, some of the steps that we've completed to date, we completed a pretty extensive municipal and agency outreach. We reviewed the previous long-range transportation plan, previous planning studies and documents that were available from municipalities and different constituencies up in the county. And we also solicited additional study ideas. We also asked the public and general stakeholders for input. We provided a update on the county website. We produced a YouTube video that explained, why people should participate in the long-range transportation planning process. We circulated a public survey where we received 477 comments. We also included a wiki map where people were able to provide very specific comments throughout the county on different types of assets and conditions. We conducted 11 targeted interviews, and then we held a series of open house drop-in meetings at different times and days of the week so that people could provide or have interaction with the project team and provide specific feedback for the plan. One thing to keep in mind is that the LRTP needs to meet very specific state and federal planning factors. The MPO uses the local insights gained from all the outreach that I just described to provide local perspective to these federal and state planning factors. And so once we completed the draft plan, both Emily and our team went through the specific checklist to make sure that the plan meets all of the federal and state requirements in order that, to be prepared for adoption. So we've completed that process. We then take the specific part of that process is to take the specific Erie County MPO long-range transportation plan goals and objectives and match them up to the FAST Act or the federal planning factors. And we also do the same thing for the state planning factors. Once again, to make sure that the local plan is very locally focused, but meets all of the state and federal requirements that are necessary. We then take all of those insights and we go through a project prioritization process. But one of the important things to note is that the long-range transportation plan has to be fiscally constrained. So we can't have projects listed for implementation in the plan that are not fully funded. And as I've pointed out in the past, Erie County's air quality conformity status changed and they no longer receive congestion management and air quality funding. So it's called CMAQ funding, which unfortunately was the lion's share of funding available in the previous plans. So before the IIJA Act was passed, we were looking at about a 50% funding reduction between this plan and the previous plans. So you'll notice that as we go through fiscal constraint, the list of projects being funded is significantly less. So, a good example of the available funding that we have is that if you take aside the Highway Safety Improvement Program funding, which can only be used for identified safety projects, we have about $606,000 a year to fund individual projects. And for those of you who have, nominated projects and looked at cost estimates, in the past for projects, that doesn't allow for a very substantial, project in any given year. So in some cases, for more extensive projects, we have to take that discretionary funding and we need to save it up for a few years in order to be able to fund a project. So those are all sort of important things to note. So we took all of the insights that we gained from our outreach exercises and the previous planning factors, and we developed a long potential project list. We then provided those projects to each municipality to review. And those packages were sent out for review and comment to gain any additional insights, make sure that the projects were still supported. If there were projects that were missing, municipalities were able to nominate additional projects to be added. We then took that and went through a project prioritization process, which is identified and outlined in the plan, where we prioritized and identified each of the potential projects to be funded according to the federal and state funding sources in order from top to bottom. At that point, we were able to go through a fiscal constraint process where we look at the available funding once we set aside, all the maintenance funding, and we have the discretionary funding that I just described earlier. And we use that to basically fund those projects in order as they're available. We did that for both baseline funding and then also for the anticipated IIJA or Infrastructure Act funding that we're anticipating will become available. That way, the MPO is prepared to respond to that additional funding as it moves forward in its programming. We took that fiscally constrained list of projects that could be implemented, and that's gone through a air quality conformity review, and that approval has been has been granted at this point. So we're able to check that box in the plan development process. One of the things that we've noted in this plan and all of our prior plans is that the outreach exercise usually produces inputs into projects that can be funded with federal and state funding sources, but also projects that are not that are not able to be funded with various federal and state funding processes or sources. So with that in mind, we didn't want to lose track of all of those really good comments. So we've identified in the plan a list of highway projects, and those are projects that can be funded through the sources. Pedestrian and bicycle projects, which are projects that affect pedestrian and bicyclists. Betterment projects, which are projects that aren't appropriate for specific project funding, but can be implemented using the PennDOT Connects process when PennDOT goes through, or a municipality or the county goes through and completes projects. So an example of that would be, a sidewalk that has a gap in it. And that sidewalk should be completed, and people have noted that there are many locations where that's the case. Well, those have all been noted and included in the betterment projects. That way, if PennDOT would go improve that road next year, they know where those gaps are and where those gaps have been identified by the public. Also, that includes notations of states of good repair. So perhaps there's a sidewalk or a shoulder that's crumbling or needs maintained in order to improve multimodal mobility. Those have all been noted as betterment projects. We've also identified a number of different studies. The studies may have been noted through a local comprehensive plan. They could also have been locations that, say the public noted that there's an issue somewhere, but it wasn't obvious what the appropriate solution would be. Well, the next step would then be to complete a study at that location to determine what the specific project solutions would be. At that point, we would have a good cost estimate, a good estimate of impacts, and that project would then be in a position to be funded in the next plan update or added to the TIP at a future date if funding was available. In addition to that, there were a number of projects that were identified on local roads. So those are not available for funding, through the typical LRTP process. But once again, we didn't want to lose track of those. Those are projects that would be really appropriate when a municipality updates their comprehensive plan, or when they begin to use their sources of funding to make improvements. They could consult those lists and understand where requests were made for improvements on local roadways or local facilities. We also have identified a series of policies that could be included. They could either be updated at the municipal level or the county level or at the state level, and those are included in the plan. Then we have lists of projects on the current TIP or the TYP, as Courtney and Lindsay and Brandon went through earlier. We've also got district bridges and the list of those bridges, which are prioritized separately from the project prioritization and the LRTP. The local bridge projects, which Emily just went through some of those on a previous note. We've got transit projects that were provided from MTA, and then aviation projects that were also provided from the PennDOT Bureau of Aviation and the Erie International Airport. So all of those elements are included in the long-range transportation plan so that you have a full perspective of multimodal transportation needs, but also potential projects and policies that are included as part of the long-range transportation plan. So this is a map of the locations of the different projects throughout the county. You've got highway projects indicated in red, bicycle and pedestrian projects indicated in orange, betterment projects are highlighted in yellow, studies are highlighted in blue, and then local projects are highlighted in green. And you can see kind of the geographic extents of those projects and the types of projects that are out there. And so the highway and the pedestrian bicycle projects are only the projects that were able to be funded within the fiscally constrained plan. We took the projects that could not be funded in the fiscally constrained plan, and those are listed as either projects that can be funded with the IIJA funding or projects that would be listed as aspirational. The aspirational projects that couldn't be funded, unfortunately, were a lot of the larger projects because funding those projects would consume the majority of the available funding in the plan. But with the IIJA Act, it is important to note that there's a lot of funding that is not designated using like schedule funding, like, each state, for example, gets a certain allotment. There's a lot of funding that is actually discretionary funding that would be able to be pursued with, competitive grants. The long range transportation plan and the other studies that go into the long range plan could really provide a good springboard to pursuing that pursuing funding through those more competitive programs. So it's important to note, once again, we didn't lose those projects. Those are still in the plan. That way you can use that to, to solicit additional funding for them. Or if the county comes into a windfall of funding, those projects would be in line to be funded. So those are important things to note. So before I get into any of the details, I just wanted to cover the schedule and see if anybody had any specific questions. So today's January 26th at the TAC meeting. Our hope is that the TAC will vote to approve the long range transportation plan for public circulation. At the same time as this, we have an agency coordination meeting that we have another team of people participating with in order to solicit additional feedback on the plan. We'll take any feedback from today and the agency coordination meeting and any other notes that or comments that we get from the MPO. We'll address those and get them to the best of our ability into a draft that would hopefully be circulated beginning tomorrow for a 30-day public comment period. 30-day public comment period would go from January 27th through the 25th. During the public comment period, we'll have a virtual public meeting on February the 16th from 12 until 2 p.m. And Emily can circulate the details and the availability of that. And then we'll have an additional in-person public meeting at the library, right, Emily?
Yes, that will be at the Admiral Room of the Belasco Memorial Library on the Bayfront.
And that'll be from 4 to 6 p.m. So those are both opportunities where we would welcome people to join the meetings. We're happy to explain the plan and the process included in the plan and answer anybody's questions. We then have a 10-day amendment period at the conclusion of that 30-day comment period, where we would take those insights and the comments, make any adjustments to the plan before we submit it for final adoption by the coordinating committee on March the 9th. And so that's the upcoming schedule for the long range transportation plan. So this has been a substantial process to get us to this point. I thank everybody for their efforts and the support throughout the process and helping us get to this point. And we look forward to an exciting next month and a half as we as we get close to the adoption of the plan. So with that, I can ask open it up to any questions anybody may have on what I presented. And then the rest of what I have is really a lot of details. And you guys can let me know if you have any specific questions or if you'd like me to, for example, walk through the list of fully funded, projects that are in the plan. But I didn't want to just assume everybody wanted to go through that. Some people are interested and some people aren't. So I just wanted to kind of take a pause and ask if anybody had any questions at this point.
Do we have any questions for Scott?
Unmute. Hi, Scott. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Scott, I'm brand new to the committee here, and I just wanted to quickly introduce myself and ask for your advice on how I might get involved. My whole motivation here, I'm a resident of Southern Erie County, and I live on a dirt road off of a dirt road. And so my motivation for getting involved was that the dirt roads are in such a state of disrepair that, for example, you have to choose which pothole to hit. And the dust, the mud is constant. Our vehicles are like covered with Adobe just about all the time. And then finally, the dust is so bad that we can't open our windows in these beautiful rural settings. So I have approached the township and many other agencies at various levels, trying to get some help, and I'll just get right to it. So when I met with LaBeouf Township, and I'm new to that township too, but I met them this summer, and they explained that they're very sympathetic. They said they live on these dirt roads as well, but they're broke, and they explained that there is no funding. In fact, they do have a plan. It was a 3, 4, or 5 year plan for tarring and chipping, because the residents, we're not asking for paving, we realize that's out of the question. We're just looking for some help. If I could send you pictures, you would probably say, I can't believe it. I mean, these roads look like Swiss cheese. You have to pick which pothole to hit. So Emily, I just met Emily. She's already given me very helpful information that I'm taking to the township today or tomorrow. But the reason I jumped in here, Scott, is I saw that you highlighted local projects. And I just wondered, maybe you would be another source for me, where you give me information on how I might go to the township and say, okay, I've heard that we're broke. I believe you, but what can we do to get funding? A lot of taxpayers live on these roads, and it's just year after year after year. So Scott, I'm just wondering, what my role might be in giving these rural residents a voice, because that's my motivation in being here, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I can honestly say that through the planning process, and like I identified earlier, we invited every municipality to participate in our process to identify projects or concerns. We solicited do they have plans in place that they would like us to account for our plan. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the rural communities are constituencies that have not actively, or at least they haven't as actively participated as I would like to see.
Right. That's why I'm here. Right.
Yeah. So I think your ability to provide those insights will be extremely valuable. You could also, I would recommend making sure that you advocate to not only your municipalities but other rural municipalities that you guys cooperate with or that you work with, to also very actively
tune in. Yeah,
you'd be surprised how many folks simply don't respond to us.
Right.
And so that would be one good place to really start. The next, and I know that Brian had mentioned perhaps doing kind of like a 101 discussion of what the different funding sources are available.
Right. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really great understanding.
Great idea, Brian. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a really outstanding opportunity to really start to sort of understand how the books go. There are a lot of requirements to the funding.
Yeah.
And there would also be an ability to perhaps suggest like a policy that could be in the plan. Like you could, even if you can't fund it, you could still help support moving your concerns forward by saying, hey, should there be like a policy or like a joint study or an effort between the rural municipalities to help find a way to to address some of these concerns. So it'll be difficult to get those projects onto the funded project list.
I see.
If they're on local roads and they're not federal aid system, we can't there are a lot of funding restrictions to what we can do.
Right.
But that's not to say that those concerns should be lost. It's nice to have it out there, and that way that's a good way to get things done. And I think the county and PennDOT have done I think just from what I've seen kind of on the sidelines, they've done a great job with the local bridge program, which folks just described earlier. And so I think that you'll find that I hope you'll find that it's a really, really great group of people to work with.
Right. Scott, I'd like to be a conduit for information back and forth, and I'm going to take everything I learn here directly to the township, not only for their information, but so that I can make sure that they really have exhausted these, opportunities for funding. I don't know that they've done that. I don't have an opinion on that, so thank you.
This is Freda. I just had some clarifying questions. So there's apparently two different public involvement processes. One is for the LRTP, which is starting tomorrow. And the other one, I believe, is in May, June. I'm not sure which document that is for. So if you could clarify, and if that information session, besides the 2-hour thing at Blasco, prior to that, an opportunity to understand the process and the MMPS and all that could be provided, that would be ideal. Maybe, like I said, the city has regular study sessions. And where do I go to see if I made comment to the plan? I may or may not have identified concerns on that map you're talking about. I comment to so many different things. And I know that the active Erie plan identified all the sidewalks that are needed. Is any of that going to be folded into the LRTP?
So I can answer some of that, and I think Emily can answer some of that. As far as whether you commented or not, yes, you did comment on it. We received those comments, and they were incorporated into the planning process. So we thank you for your participation. It's always great when folks participate. The Active Erie plan was also one of the plans that was included as part of our literature review, so that we could carry the projects and the needs from that plan forward into the overall county planning process, similar to what we did for all of the other municipal plans. So yes, we carried those forward. Emily, do you want to maybe talk about the differences between this public meeting and the other public meeting in the May timeframe?
Sure. So this specifically is for the 2050 long-range transportation plan. The other one I was talking about earlier is for the 4-year transportation improvement program, which is updated every 2 years. So every 2 years, the TIP gets updated short term, and every 5 years, the LRTP gets updated, and it's much longer term. So they're just two different plans. Ideally, they flow into one another. Things identified in the LRTP get added to the TIP, which is the list of projects that will hopefully go into construction in the next 4 years. So there are two different sets of documents here. They will be both on the Erie County website. Maybe I can add a link. But they are all going to be posted on the website. They will also be available in the libraries, the physical copies in the libraries for people to read. We'll also have them in the Erie County Planning Department office, the physical copies for anyone who wants to read. And if anyone would like to request a printed copy, they can do that also by contacting me, or would like to request translation services, we can do that as well for either of the documents as we move forward with their adoption.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Scott? Anybody want to see any more detail from what he has, or are we ready to move on? Okay, I'll take that as a sign that we're ready to move on. So I think next what we need right now, I'll entertain a motion to present the LRTP in its most current form for public comment. Anybody would like to make that motion?
This is Brian McNulty. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have a second? Well, I will second that.
Okay.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries, and we'll forward that on to public comment hopefully tomorrow once Scott and Emily have gone through it. I'd like to thank again Emily and Scott and your team at WRA for all the hard work you've done on the LRTP. I know it's a lot, and you've been working on it for quite a while, so it's good to see it coming closer to the finish line. Next, any other business? Does any committee members have any other business? Any comments? All right. Well, hearing none, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. Do we have a second?
I second. Brian McNulty.
Thanks, Brian. All right. Well, we stand adjourned then. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming, and we hope to see you at the next meeting in March.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.